In this episode, we weigh in on the Biden age issue and consider whether he's being selfish or selfless in refusing to drop out. We'll consider the effort to convince people that continues to this day that the Civil War was not about slavery. And we'll get into the problem many have expressed with Bronny James, son of LeBron James, being drafted into the NBA and signing his first contract with the NBA, and despite the fact that he didn't have a great college season last year. Hello, welcome to the Call Like I See It podcast. I'm James Keys, and riding shotgun with me is a man who's been known to move from side to side on the political spectrum, almost in a rhythmic way. Tunde Ogunlana. Tunde, you ready to show the people how you go side to side like you're swag surfing?
Yeah, but and my wife used to say I had two left feet when I danced, so let's see how that goes in the conversation.
See how that goes. All right. Yeah. All right. Now, before
she didn't mean like two politically left feet. She just meant I was uncoordinated and couldn't dance. So just to be sure, because we're talking politics.
Just to clarify.
Yeah, just to clarify.
Yeah. That's triggering for some.
Yeah, that would trigger some people.
If you enjoy the show, we ask that you hit subscribe or like on your podcast app or YouTube. Doing so really helps the show out. Now, we're recording this on July 7th, 2027. And Tunde, over the last week or two, really since Biden's poor performance in the first presidential debate, there's been much discussion on whether he needs to get out of the race because he's just too old to run for president or too old to be president. Calls for him to drop out have really picked up. And there have been, reports of private calls. There's been public calls and so forth. And this is coming from the media, from other political leaders and so forth. And Biden has tried to reassure his supporters and the American people, but his efforts don't seem to have been that effective. So it really seems like Biden's performance in the debate confirmed many suspicions about the age. And there's just not a lot of evidence to the contrary that people can use to refute that. And so it's he can't make them unsee that. So to get us started, what have your been thoughts on kind of just Biden, what's been termed as him bombing the debate and his efforts since then, and just the idea of how defiant he is that he's not leaving the race and that he wants to stay in and so forth?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting as you set it up, because you said something that I think we can all appreciate is that no one can unsee what they saw that night, the debate. And so, I'll start off with that, acknowledging that, Biden, his performance was a disaster, and he didn't give much confidence to anybody that all the negative projections about his cognitive decline aren't somewhere based in some sort of fact. Like everybody could see that the guy was just struggling and that didn't look good. And, forget about anything anyone wants to say about he's got a great team or he just was tired and all that. At the end of the day, part of politics in the modern era with television and media and all that is about performance. I think the first time that was seen in American politics was the 1960 debate between John Kennedy and Richard Nixon. Yeah. And a lot of people believe Nixon lost the debate and kind of the momentum he had because of a poor performance, not verbally or intellectually from Nixon, but he was sweating all over the TV. And that was back early in the TV world where I guess they didn't realize about makeup and how hot it is going to be under the lights and all that. And that, and then you have this young guy, the good looking guy, John Kennedy, who looks smooth. Yeah. And I think, that debate between Trump and Biden was a great example of that. The optics, definitely favored Donald Trump and did not favor Joe Biden. So I think, that'll be my initial response. And then, who I know will get into it.
I think you're correct in the sense that the Biden and his team underestimated what aesthetics and optics mean in the modern world. And I hate to say that because he's been a politician in the TV age for 40 years. So it's not like or 50 years. It's not like this should have caught him by surprise. But if you can't perform when it's time to perform, then that calls into question everything. And I think what's really exacerbated this is that he hasn't been overly public before this. And so if you don't give people a lot of data points and say, like, if he had been, doing fireside chats for every week or every, twice a month for the past 6 months, and then the debate was seen as an aberration, then it's easier to dismiss. But when you skip the Super Bowl interview, when you don't get in and do a lot of media appearances, except very scripted and controlled situations. But if you don't do like open situations often, then you go out and do one, and it's all bad, and it's bad in the way that people have been wondering, hey, can this guy deliver? Then you really put yourself behind the 8 ball. And he doesn't. Now he's trying to play catch up and trying to create more data points. But it's like, well, look, man, first impressions, quote unquote, matter, and so you've given people an impression now. It's not a first impression from the standpoint of, have we ever seen Joe Biden? But maybe in this campaign cycle, that's a first impression as far as, okay, what's this guy looking like right now? And he didn't deliver. And I think you have to start with that. Like, his job was to put on a certain level of performance and to make people believe that he was capable of doing stuff. Again, this is a leadership position. We're not asking him to crunch numbers. He's not asking him to be an accountant or be this and that. He needs to be a leader, and a leader needs to be able to stand up and get people behind him. And if he's over here mumbling and stuff like that, that's just not the appearance of somebody that you feel like is going to be able to lead, get people behind you. Hey, we're going this way. Let's ride.
No, and I think, it's interesting, the contrast. This really shows, I think, the contrast of the psychology of the voters of both parties, at least in today's current makeup. I don't want to hear about
that's a good point.
50 years ago, because Trump has definitely shown, if you listen to him and watch him talk, also cognitive decline. I mean, the guys are 3 years apart, and that's what I mean. Everyone acts like that they're so different. Trump, mistook Nikki Haley for Nancy Pelosi. I remember for like 5 minutes straight when it was the primary campaign when Nikki Haley was still running. He recently, I saw him on a speech, kept calling his former White House physician, Ronnie Johnson, many times. I don't need to name all his gaffes, but he clearly is also an old man that forgets stuff and all that. Now he speaks much more forcefully and boldly than Biden, because Trump understands the importance of optics and marketing and all that. And he's a great showman. So in that sense, he definitely performs better than Biden.
He understands that what comes out of your mouth is less important than how it comes out of you.
And how it comes out, correct. And no, it's true. He's an entertainer. He's great at it, right? And so that's what I'm saying. It's interesting that it's kind of like the fans of Donald Trump, like you said, they're less concerned with what comes out of his mouth and more concerned with how the optics of the messaging are. Because there's interesting questions I would have loved to have Biden ask him, like he recently announced before the debate that he wanted to do away with the income tax altogether and replace that with 80 to 100% tariffs. That's a big deal for a candidate for president of the United States to announce that his plan is to totally change our tax revenue system and all that.
Especially considering inflation is something we're worried about right now. And that's the kind of thing that would drive
and that's what I mean. I'm not even here to pick that apart. I'm just saying that that's a massive change that's being proposed, and no one seems to want to follow up questions about that.
Substantive.
Which they should.
There was something, there was a direction you went. I want to take that a little further, though, in terms of the reaction of the parties, because what is interesting to me, and I'm not saying this in a good or bad way, it's just very interesting that Trump has his deficiencies as well, but it seems like the from his party, it literally is his party at this point, but the effort and the energy seems to go towards either obscuring, covering up, whatever his deficiencies are. Whenever he makes a gaffe, you don't see that on replay in conservative media ecosystems. That's kind of that stuff is not there. But whereas now this also reveals kind of that the media ecosystems aren't necessarily equivalent and mirror images, but nonetheless, when Trump has his deficiencies, those deficiencies, the effort is made to obscure those. When Biden has his deficiencies, it's like, hey, freak out publicly about it. And so that to me is just interesting in the way that the reaction goes. But I honestly believe, though, that both people's deficiencies should be brought to the head. So I'm happy that at this point, if we haven't concerned about Biden's age, I don't want that resolved in some room that nobody gets to sit in. And it's like, all right, we're just going to do this. I'm happy that public scrutiny is as voters, that's our only way to that's our primary way to have influence on this process prior to election day. And so like who we get to vote for. So the public scrutiny that Biden is going through right now is healthy for our system. I would want more public scrutiny for Trump personally. And so we really vet these guys and see what's going on. So, but in general, I want to add, switching gears briefly, I do want to ask you, like, from Biden's point of view, like, what is he doing? Like, do you think that he's looking at this like, I'm the only one? Like, has he fall into that absolute power kind of mindset or power mindset where he's like, I'm the only one that can save the country from Trump? Like, why do you think he's so adamant now when clearly the trend lines are against him, whether it be polling? Polling has been saying for years that people think he's too old and support seems to be waning, but he's so defiant right now. He's much, much more defiant now that he's not going to come out of the race than he was making points during the debate. It energizes him, So what do you think is going on there? Like, why is the only thing that really gets him fired up is that he's not going to leave the race?
I'm going to go somewhere you wouldn't expect me to go.
Okay.
I'm going to scripture.
Oh, okay. Here we go.
I'm going to get biblical with it because I feel like Moses right now because I'm just looking at a bunch of idolatry. Because you're right. I mean, you said I say that joke because you said something I put it in my mind, which is the way does he think that he's the only person that can save the country from Trump? And it made me think of that Trump will tell everybody that he's the only person that can save the country from Biden.
So both of these dudes are playing us.
That's what I mean. It's kind of, again, they're avatars for something else, right?
Yeah.
That we are so kind of polarized and, it's not even both of their fault. It's the whole, last 20, 30 years, like we've been talking about on various discussions about the media ecosystems and all that. And the bottom line is I think, to answer your question, I got no idea what's going on through Biden's head. And based on that debate performance, he may not have 100% idea what's going on through his head. And that's kind of it's a bad joke, but it's true, right? That we don't know how he's thinking right now. As a human being, of course, I can appreciate if he feels, hey, look, I got us here. I beat Trump once. I think I'm doing a good job, even though I'm a little bit slow. I know I'm 81, blah, 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 but I can do this. I think him personally, I could see that being his attitude. But this is the whole point to me of having a political party apparatus that would be healthy, that doesn't try and anoint people, but kind of sees, can be a check and balance against, an individual who's seeking to maybe retain their power a little bit longer than is appropriate. And then, just the reality of the situation. I mean, this is unprecedented. I mean, it's all unprecedented from what Trump's going through and the fact that he's a nominee with all these felonies to what the Supreme Court just threw this hand grenade in the situation of maybe he can be prosecuted, maybe he can at this point. And then on the other side, the alternative is a guy who, like we've been talking about, clearly didn't show up to tell the country he's ready to take this on again. Yeah. So, I mean, it's just, again, if both these men, that's what I mean. It's interesting. If Biden doesn't step down, he's going to put the country through something that probably most of us would rather not go through. And Trump clearly has gotten this far and is going to put the country through something that we probably would rather not go through. Versus what I'm saying is, had he decided not to run, had the Republican Party as a party decided to, maybe go the direction of Nikki Haley or Ron DeSantis or one of these other candidates. So,
yeah. Well, I think
I don't
know. while the specifics may be unprecedented,
I'll tell you after November how I feel about
it. But what we're seeing, though, definitely seems to be kind of normal humanity type stuff. Like this is the hubris. This is the like you said, I beat him before. I can beat him again. I'm trying to prevent this and so forth. And what's interesting to me about it is that almost in a movie sense, and I'm gonna throw it in a direction that I know you'll appreciate. This is kind of like the way Biden is behaving is in a sense almost makes it more likely to bring about what he's trying to prevent. And that reminds me of, Star Wars and like the Jedi, you go to episode 3 and so forth, like what the Jedi had become at a certain point, the way they operated actually enabled the dark side to take over, it was part of what the dark side needed to take over. And so, and I see this also like this analogy, and the analogy has been made with Ruth Bader Ginsburg and with Biden and so forth. But that fits in that analogy as well. It's just like, well, Ruth Bader Ginsburg was, a champion of reproductive rights and so forth. But by her, when dealing with the Democratic Party, when Obama was in office, and they're saying, hey, you might want to resign now so we can replace you with someone who's like-minded to you. She refused to do that. And by her doing that, she helped bring about the overturning of Roe, like with people who wanted to overturn. Like, I'm not blaming her for that. Like, I'm not going to blame the person who failed to prevent something in the same way that I look at the person who caused it. But at the same time, if that's something that's important to you, then I would think you would almost be willing to do anything that would help, anything, legally above board and all that, that would help prevent bringing about what you're trying to prevent. And so in this case, Biden, weakness as a candidate, inability to perform the show trappings of the presidential job. Like, wait, he might be able. I'm not saying he can't perform the technical stuff and get in and do whatever needs to be done with his advisor and make the decisions. I don't know. I'm not in those rooms, but he's not at this point. It doesn't look like he's able to perform the showy parts of the job, which is a part of it. You do need to be able to make people feel good about their leadership, feel good about what's going on in the country, feel like you're in good hands and so forth. And he doesn't right now, based on the limited sample size they're giving us in the campaign, doesn't seem like he's able to do that. And so by that, he may be setting himself up to run in a race that he can't win, not because the other side is so strong, but just because he's so weak, which would bring about what he's trying to prevent. And so to me, it's interesting that you see that, but that's kind of a human thing. Like you'll see it gets talked about in movies, it's a theme that you see throughout humanity where people, oftentimes with power and leadership positions, will begin themselves to center themselves so much in that struggle that they lose sight of the bigger picture and what they may have been. And, Biden says this is about democracy being on the ballot itself. Well, hey, man, you being on the ballot doesn't give democracy its best chance.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting too, because you see it in sports as well, where great players, that I'm not comparing Biden to a great athlete, but what I'm saying is when a player that was really good or great kind of stays in the game too long in terms of the amount of years, and it's hard because I can appreciate that you think you got it and you don't want to acknowledge that you missed a step or you lost a step, I should say. As a funny joke, I remember playing because I played NCAA basketball, just for the audience reference, because I remember when I was 33 and I was playing in the Monday Night League in Boca, and it was still like a competitive league for like over 30s guys, And I remember I saw this gap in the defense. I was on the wing with the ball, and I made my move, my quick first step, and I remember I saw the defense close, and there was two guys standing there at the basket. And my brain really, I'm talking in a split second. I had this whole conversation with myself. And I was like, man, what the hell are those two guys doing there? And then the other voice came in and was like, dude, you lost a step, man.
Yeah, you had already been there. You had already been past 10 years ago.
If I was 25, I'd already been, at the hoop. But now I'm not. I'm old and I'm working in corporate America and I'm playing in the Monday Night League. So it was like one of those where my mind was like, hold on, man, this can't be real. This can't be happening. Yeah. So it's like, I get it, but I wasn't trying to.
That's a hard, that kind of self honesty is difficult. And then just being able to see it. And I think the people.
But what's funny though, just to finish, number one, I wasn't trying to run the country. I was playing in the Monday Night League.
The stakes are a little lower.
So there, but you know what ended it for me, honestly, is later that same season, I tore my Achilles tendon and I had a 6-month-old kid. My youngest kid was 6 months. And I remember sitting in a hard cast with a 6-month-old baby sitting on the couch. And it was like, in my head, I'm like, okay, I'm too old for this now. Like, I can't be playing in these leagues and getting hurt. I got a family to take care of. So it really was an actual injury that forced that decision for me. And I think going back to the conversation at hand, that'll be the sad part with Biden. If it takes something like that, like he physically has to either, get worse in front of our eyes, or he just something, he doesn't do this on his own type of thing.
Well, but that's the thing. Like the people around you sometimes can be the ones that can help you see before it's too late. Like you had to suffer the down in order to see, and right now, I guess Biden hasn't suffered enough of a down in order to see what's happening. And so, but the people around him, maybe could get through to him, like the people that are close to him. But a lot of times what I think what's happening there is that because this has been a line of attack on Biden, the age thing for so long, that they've been conditioned themselves to kind of think that any attack on his age is some partisan hit job or whatever. And so they may not be able to see clearly in terms of, okay, well, this guy's lost his step, but maybe losing a step isn't the end of the world. But again, I get back to the whole thing of, can you perform the kind of show duties of the president? I think back to like FDR, And like FDR, remember when he was campaigning and so forth, he hid his partial paralysis that came from polio and so forth, because he understood the optics of, hey, I can't face if people, when I'm doing these appearances, and this is before TV, but if I'm doing these appearances and people see me as not vigorous and strong, that they're going to have a negative mindset about me about that. And so he hid that. Now, his mind wasn't affected with that, so to speak. So that's the stakes, I say, are a little lower, with aging's necessary than like a disease that affects your body. But nonetheless, it kind of reminds me of that in the sense that, well, with FDR, he decided to hide, that and, and so forth. And I wonder if this is with Biden, if they've just, and the reason why we don't have a lot of data points of Biden being vigorous is that there has been the decision to hide up until now. And then when they couldn't hide anymore, he was kind of exposed. And then now what do you do? But again, you have the bunker mentality that, oh, well, whenever they say this is just right-wing talking points or whatever like that. And then they can't honestly evaluate the situation anymore. So you're in this tough spot where it's like, well, and again, are you going to, based on your conduct, bring about you the person who's telling me that democracy is on the ballot? Are you the person who's going to bring about or lesser the chances of democracy being able to win because you can't see clearly what's going on, so to speak?
Yeah, well, and you make a great point with this term bunker mentality, because I would say this. Number one is that's, again, where both men are the avatars, in my opinion, for how people feel. I mean, this really is about, I think, for the voters, I would say, people got to look and reflect, because you're right. What a great point you make, that because Biden's age and his kind of feebleness and all that has been an attack from the right for so long, a lot of Democrats, or let's say Biden supporters even, because I know a lot of Democrats right now do think Biden should step aside, but those who think he should stay, they may be clouded by the history of those attacks on Biden by his opponents. And now feel like the bunker mentality, like we got to fight this and all that. And I would say, again, it's a direct mirror and avatar to certain fans of Donald Trump who feel like the legal pressure and all the stuff he's been through is just another attack, like they felt like the Russia hoax and the Mueller report.
Yeah. Well, and I'd say with Trump is a master at creating that, though. Like you and I have talked about this as it was happening over the years. How like everything that happens to him, he's really good at communicating to his people. Like, hey, they're doing this to me, they're doing this to you, and we gotta, like kind of circle the wagons and so forth.
Yeah, and it's a victim mentality thing, and I think it's interesting to see now Biden and his kind of the people that are still supporting him and saying nothing to see here are taking that same victim mentality as well. Like, oh, well,
circling the wagons,
circling the wagons and trying to say there's nothing to see here, right? Like the defenders of Donald Trump. So again, that's why everybody thinks they're so different, which they are very different men, obviously, of how they're made up and how they behave. But it's just the way that we as the public kind of throw arrows and try to protect them is very similar, and that to me is interesting here. And so, but I think just to finish it off with Biden is it'll be very interesting to see where this goes, because like I said, this is unprecedented.
Yeah, this isn't done yet. And just to be clear, I mean, I'm not, and I know you're not trying to draw an equivalence in terms of the character of the man of Biden and Trump. Like I would say, speaking for myself, I mean, I think the character of Biden is Biden has much more character than Trump, and I'm not saying that Trump is the answer if Biden is Biden is too old. My main point is just to look at what's going on with Biden and say, hey, you are saying democracy's on the ballot or that Trump is unfit and yada, 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 and which I can agree with that stuff. But your behavior, your actions by staying in the race at a point when you can't deliver the goods on television the way you need to suggests that either you don't really think that or you don't know how bad you look. So to me, it's more of a looking at Biden and say, hey, you're saying this, hey, the stakes are high and all that. I can agree with all that, but
no, you're right.
You're behaving
creates
like
a dissonance that you can't really solve easily, right? Like it's like, okay, well, if it's this existential, the threat that Trump's going to cause a democracy, then what the hell are you doing trying to be in the way of?
You're not the
dude. You can't get people out of this mess.
Exactly. So to me, that's really the kind of point that really catches my eye is that, okay, well, like I can agree with all that stuff that he's saying, but then his own behavior undermines that, because it's like, all right, so If all of this is an existential threat, but all we got is this 81-year-old dude who can't really perform on television, like that can't be the case. Like those two don't match up. And it's one or the other. Either it's that serious and we need to get somebody that can at least, again, perform the optics of it, or it's not that serious and you can kind of, go up in your walker and just kind of do appearances and we're all good. So, this is not over. So we'll continue to see, how these different factors play in. But I think it's helpful when you're looking at this stuff to not reflexively just say, oh, well, I like Biden, and so therefore I can't see any of this, or I dislike Trump, and so I can't see any of this, or I like Trump, and so therefore everything Trump does is okay. I'll excuse it, or whatever. So it part of it, again, as citizens who vote, is we got to be able to look at this stuff and kind of think about it beyond just picking teams and all that. And this is an example of that. So, but no, I think we can wrap this topic from there. Please join us for our second two topics today. And we'll talk to you then.